before anything else, thank you for doing the interview. You seem to be quite the Twitter political educator. Rather than characterize what you're doing, I'd like for you to describe what you set out to do online and how it connects with your day-to-day life.
Mostly it was to relax because I was getting annoyed with the whole news media, everyone like shilling for Obama, everyone's just praising, like, so it was just a venting where I would just like say things that would make me mad. And somehow people liked it. And so that's basically what I do. Is I have a really good memory. So it's hard. Like, I remember once where somebody had signed a petition way back in August, and then I ran into that person again in November, and she tried to sign it. I was like, no, you signed it in August. And I totally creeped her out because it's just weird that the petition lady remembers her. For me, when I started really paying attention to American news, like it would really hit me because, for example, when Hillary said, I forgot what she said, but she claimed that she didn't say the super predator thing, and I remembered it, like her saying it, and I found the video. Like, this was when I was not involved in the campaign, but each time I knew a lie, like I remembered where to find the information to debunk the lie. And so I got a big following, and that's kind of what happened. So I was teaching at RMIT back then, and I moved back to the US, and I quit working in, I was already transitioning to policy, but then I moved to full-time policy work as opposed to corporate law work, which really sucks. And so now I'm really happy. I've worked for a few political candidates. I've learned a lot about how to connect with people in a political manner, but it also helped me learn the futility of electoralism. But while I was working with the political candidates, I kind of understood that the main difference was I remembered history, they didn't, and that left them a little bit more right-winged. And so that's how I started my podcast, and it took off, and I stopped doing policy work. So now I only like do volunteer, and hopefully if more people support me, like I do, I want to go full-time on, so I do part-time, but now I want to, if it's possible, I'd love to just write articles and do historically and not do anything else. But that's hopefully in the next few years, we'll see.
Okay, that's actually, I think, a pretty good intro, and I'm really glad that you're considering a full-time shift, because I was actually one of the aspects of that question was also to find out how you kind of, as a Marxist-Leninist, how do you make your peace with your day-to-day, and how do you kind of like balance it out?
I do data work with a lot of economists, and I've been working with a university in Russia, and so there's nothing to, I mean, they don't care. Like it's not the same thing. I have a very different job.
Okay. No, that's what I was curious to know about. But I kind of also wanted, since like you said, that you encounter all sorts of people online, and educating is something that you do on a day-to-day basis, both on historically as well as your own account, your own personal account. My friend Ross Barkan, who was on the on the last event that he actually wrote a very long article recently trying to kind of characterize the United States left as factions of the Democratic Party. Like he described it as like the socialist left, which is like the DSA, and then the liberal left, which is the standard centrist party, and then the alphabet left, he called it, which is like the WFP.
I haven't read the article. Can I see that first?
Yeah, sure. Like you encounter every day, all sorts of characters from the American left, and also characters who are not, I mean, like especially anarchists, and like you have, I see a lot of conversations on Twitter that you have.
That's because I enjoy it. That's stress relief again. So now that Hillary Clinton's gone, like I need a new target.
Okay. So I'd like to hear what your categorization of the American left, or your understanding of what the United States left itself is, and like how you would respond to. You haven't read the article, you said, so it's probably not fair to like ask you to respond to like a 3-line representation of a 6,500 word article, I think.
I don't want to comment on
But
article.
sure, yeah. But I would like to hear your thoughts on what you think are like the sort of categories of people on or who identify as some sort of left in the United States.
Yeah, what they identify versus objective reality are two different things, because there's a lot of people who identify as a lot of things, but they take it as a brand name because the US is the culture here is so bad at resisting capitalistic brainwashing and hegemony that there isn't anything, to be honest, to call a left even.
Okay, that would be your answer, basically.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. How? I mean, like, I would still like you to, like, get into what your opinions are of the so-called existing factions and why you would not consider them to be part of any meaningful left.
Okay. What I say is that my opinion is completely irrelevant and also stupid, but what we should do is look at somebody who's very good at revolutions, Vladimir Lenin, and let's see what he would say. Because if you can't handle status quo, you'll have to learn why, but there isn't going to be a legal method for you to reach it because the state's entire purpose is to suppress one class over the other. So in order to do that, when you don't have power, it's like I don't know if you know the story of, I forgot, but you've seen those little ants, right? You don't think they're, when you look at a little ant, it can't hurt you. But guess what? In the Dwindle of the Desert, when you have like millions of those ants, they can like strip an elephant to its bones. So that is mass action. So when you don't have power, the only way you can have infinite power is everyone collectively acting together like you are those murderous ants in the desert. I forgot, what are those ants?
Fire ants? Are they what are called fire ants? Sahara desert ant. I think it's called the desert ant.
Yes, that's the one that stripped the. Okay, here. I can if you can handle it. Yeah, here is basically it eats elephants alive because they storm together. In America right now, there is no left because what we have is a lot of little ants all by themselves, and they're eating a little bit of grass if they can. And if an elephant comes, they're going to get stepped on. So Lenin, in What is to be Done or Where to Begin, tried to explain to people and get them to behave more like these ants. Constitutional illusions are what we call a political error when people believe in the existence of a normal, judicial, orderly, legalized, in short, constitutional system, although it does not exist. Liberals, what they do is they try to make society seem like a machine where there's like this perfect constitutional system where it'll like spit out justice. And unfortunately, it's not that way. It's a class conflict. In order for you to even begin to understand the solution, you need to start seeing yourself as a member of the class. This is what Lenin says in Our Immediate Task. Like I said, my opinion is irrelevant because I haven't done anything. So don't ever listen to anybody's opinion unless it's like, make them show what they've done. Only when the individual realizes that he's a member of the entire working class, and only when he recognizes the fact that his petty day-to-day struggle against the individual employers and the individual government officials is a struggle against the entire bourgeoisie and the entire government, does his struggle become a class struggle. Every class struggle is a political struggle. These are the famous words of Marx, are not to mean that any struggle of workers against the employers must always be a political struggle. They must be understood to mean that the struggle of the workers against the capitals inevitably becomes a political struggle in so far as it becomes a class struggle. So we don't have that individuals realizing that they are members of the class yet. And so so they can't even see the problem. And so there's no way to even go to the next step of like coordinating actions, right?
You're already answering my next question, I think, because I can't say that I read because I'm not sure how much I succeeded at reading, but I tried to read what is to be done. I finished it, and I mean, it's short, and he's an extremely
Hilarious
dense, but also extremely funny writer with a lot of. You kind of definitely warm me up to the idea of I've always been intimidated about reading Marx, Lenin,
well, come on,
the original scholars.
Okay, so illiterate peasants in Russia did it. So anyone who says that, say that you are not working 14 hours. Actually, in the book called A History of the Soviet Union, there's like, if you turn into the third page, they'll talk about it. Workers they couldn't read or write, worked for 14 hours a day. And then they came to learn how to read with Lenin and his wife, because if they learned how to read, they could get like one little promotion, and they learned how to read using Karl Marx. So that's just bullshit. So I never believed by that.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, like I did read for this, and I've been like reading the early writings of Marx. Very recently, I started doing that, reading Critique of the Hegelian Right, and like I wanted to say, Lenin talks about the spontaneity of the masses as as part of the social democratic revolution. It's kind of blasphemy to be even equating the two, but seeing what happened with Bernie, do you think there is any kind of revolutionary spontaneity in the US? And as a follow-up, I think I wanted to
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, as a follow-up, I wanted to ask you what do you think are factors that could tilt the circumstances in favor of spontaneous revolution?
Okay, there will be no spontaneous revolution. That is impossible. That has never happened in history. You know why? The people who are opposing you are let's look at this. The US Army. What is the budget they have? How many nukes they have? The entire US police force, every single capitalist, every single mercenary, every single piece of technology you have, all of it is owned by the capitalist class. Like, if there's a revolution, like they can like shut off the water, shut off the internet, there's nothing they won't be willing to do to stop that. Because revolutions are basically like you're trying to get a Hamlet, you're giving 1,000 monkeys a typewriter to do this. So spontaneous revolution is a myth, and it'll never happen. And spontaneous revolution is the idea where if things get bad enough, people are going to be like, oh my God, things are bad, let's revolt. And then so what happens is that there'll be spontaneous outbursts, like for example, the George Floyd protests or the LA riots. It will be just boom, and then it'll be easily quelled because you are fighting against an extremely well-trained army whose specialty is counterinsurgency, which is quelling protesters when things get really bad. So there's no way. And in America, they fetishize spontaneous revolutions because they want to stigmatize the working class coming together and coordinating action, because the few versus the many. So that's why you get all these I'm not going to name names, but you will know who I'm talking about. Certain quote unquote leftist magazines that still demonize Lenin and fetishize that some stupid commune that stayed open for 4 days or something in the middle of nowhere, Europe, and certain drone bases in Syria. That's because they have drank the Kool-Aid, which means they have been taught by the ruling class to view any kind of planning by poor people as evil, immoral, authoritarian. And so that is literally the dumbest idea. And you're going to hear certain intellectuals whose name may rhyme with Gomsky who repeat this crap. And just remember that they are not bringing class consciousness. They are having a counter-revolutionary role in society, and they must be dealt with accordingly.
I mean, it's especially interesting to be talking to you as the Amazon union election is happening in Bessemer. What is the Marxist-Leninist perspective on the push to unionize at Amazon?
it's great because that is the first time that many people, fighting is a hard thing and it does not come naturally to humans. That's why the army sends people to school for a while to train people, because that's not something you do naturally. When you're so poor that in order to, like, it's basically a hostage situation, you're going to be very timid in fighting for your rights because you don't know who's against you. You're all alone in this world. So even if the Amazon elections was rigged and they've screwed them over, what happened between the day they called the election and today, hundreds of workers got together, went to each other's house. For the first time, they spoke about their work conditions. The fact that they were going to each other's house and saying, hey, do you have to pee in a bottle? Yes, so do I. They'll realize that their struggles are the same. So I think that even if it failed, the process where people are just talking to the workers about their work conditions is a good idea. But what is not going on is that there's not enough exposure of that. I wish I had the time, but we need more people anonymously giving us their horror stories every day. We need to have databases to collect it. We need to just report it to the NLRB, just because that way there'll be a complaint. And even if they dismiss it, there'll be a record that you can Google, and if there's 10,000 complaints, people are going to think you're guilty. So I think that, yes, this election was a lot of intimidation, a lot of anti-union propaganda, fear mongering, God knows what else, like that the workers are not telling us. But the process is still very important for the worker to kind of understand, I guess, reorient the thinking from being just like stressed all the time to being overworked to just like thinking about like what's going on here.
Am I reading it correctly to say that Lenin kind of saw unionizing as a counter-revolutionary measure? Because
No.
he didn't. Okay.
What he said was trade unionism. That's a different ballgame. So he wants people, like, it's like an entry point. He just doesn't want you to stay there. So trade unionism is basically what the AFL-CIO, I forgot, what's the last letter?
AFL-CIO.
Okay, because it's really confusing for natural reasons.
Yes.
They did this in the 1948, where before the unions would like do demonstrations against wars. They supported the Soviet Union. They forced the US to deliver food to Germany. But then they literally moved it away from all political matters to just like, okay, higher wages, better healthcare, better retirement benefits, just kind of those things. So he thinks that is counter-revolutionary because ultimately, as he said, every struggle becomes a political struggle against the state because the state is an apparatus to suppress one class over another. So if the unions are just like stuck just fighting the employer, then you are just like letting the capitalists eat it up. And then there's going to be a Ronald Reagan very soon. And Lenin was very prescient about it. So he doesn't think unions alone are counter-revolutionary. He thinks unions getting stuck in trade unionism is counter-revolutionary.
Right. Thank you for that clarification. I actually think that's like a good place, especially since you say every struggle is a struggle against the state. It's a nice place to get to the topic that I mainly wanted to talk to you about. I'm curious to know how you see MMT as a tool, modern monetary theory, as a tool to bring about the dictatorship of the proletariat, or as a tool to be... Sorry, just to complete that thought. First, can you clarify what modern monetary theory is, just for, for the purpose of this conversation, and then explain how you interpret it from a Marxist-Leninist perspective?
Okay. Modern monetary theory, it's an economic model. An economic model is where you take data and then you make some sort of equation, something where you can feed the data and get an output. And if the model if it predicts things, economic phenomenon accurately, you just continue to use it. A lot of people used to think that money needed to be like some sort of tangible good, and as in like gold, silver, something. And basically, it all started with John Locke, where he made up some crap about how if you have something that's in the state of nature and you mix your labor with it, allegedly, it's supposed to turn into a commodity. And if you mix a lot of labor, it turns into a lot of commodities. And then once you have a lot of labor, you apparently sell your commodities and become rich, which is not, is just 100% opposite of the way the world works. That's where he's like explained how wealth originated. But that's like literally the opposite way. So the idea is that money is a tool of state control, kind of like the military. Ultimately, power comes from the military or the police or whatever you want to call them. So, but then there is a way for you to control basically the second way to make people participate in the economy. Because I mean, if like some crazy guy was coming at your house with a barrel of a gun, you're going to be like, okay, my little farmland, I'm just going to feed me and my family, and you're all going to become atomized, right? So that crazy guy would have had to give you like 50 coins and said, like, by the end of the year, if you don't give me like 8 bushels of grain and 10 coins back, I'm going to beat you up. And so that's kind of how the reason why the two things a state needs is money and a police or military or whatever you want to call it. And so it is, and the reason why the king used gold or silver was simple. It's kind of like why the US has an exclusive monopoly on the mint. He could control all the gold deposits in his kingdom. And he'd give like a careful monopoly, and that way he kind of got to control the supply, and that allows him to control the economy. So now, once we kind of understood why there's money, we have to understand who can make money or create money or print money. And that is a government that has sovereignty. So not every government has sovereignty. For example, the state of New York doesn't. You can't print our own money, but the federal government does. And the idea is that because money is a tool of suppressing one class, basically money is very political. People think it's apolitical, but it's not. For example, there is no reason why we can't, like, since money is like whatever the king writes on it, right? There is absolutely no reason why we can't say, hey, this dollar will expire in 10 years so that people can't hoard too much money, right? Or if you have like, or you could have like a geometric function where the dollars like explodes. I don't know, whatever. It's like you can like just have it spontaneously explode. And then you don't even have to worry about taxes, actually.
like the cash that if you steal if you rob a bank or something, then the cash notes just like splash the blue ink or something like that. Maybe something like that.
Yeah, but instead, if you rob it, if you like leave it in the bank for too long, it'll like all turn into blue ink.
Right.
So yeah, so that's like a political decision made by somebody in history. So people need to stop thinking about money as a state of nature, because it's not. For like I said, you can have it explode and or disappear. Like now we have a computer, so we can literally do anything we want with money. And money is just a shortcut for allocating resources, giving people the freedom to like allocate resources from themselves, from the state, is basically what you need to think about money. Like if you give people like fish, you're not getting them freedom to like figure out what they need to eat, but you're forcing fish upon them. So, and that's kind of why I support UBI too. And so basically we can't have a democracy without having a state money, but the kind of democracy we have, it depends on the way we think about money, we create money, and we decide to use money. And that is the fundamental concept of modern monetary theory. With it, it can explain thousands of things, like literally, like, why can we afford all these wars? Because and Ben, if you don't believe me, can you put the Ben Bernanke clip where he says,
"Is that tax money that the Fed is spending?"
It's not tax money. The banks have
accounts with the Fed, much the same way that you have an account in a commercial bank. So to lend to a bank, we simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account that they have with the Fed. So it's much more akin, although not exactly the same, but it's much more akin to printing money than it is to borrowing.
Alan Greenspan also says, we can print money. So, and that's it. I don't have any political ideology. I just know it works to describe money. That's all.
Right. I have not finished the deficit myth, but I am like halfway through it. And I think I got a little bit of the sense of what you're describing, which is that I think she kind of like breaks it down in the easiest way that I can explain it, which is that the government spends first and then accounts for it later, and then taxes later to kind of like account for it, where it doesn't have to tax at all. You could just like spend. And instead like have a job guarantee.
No. Taxes is not for accounting. Taxes is to give your money any value. No one would accept like these green pieces of paper unless there's somebody on the other side, like come April, who has a big machine gun who says, if you don't give me 100 of these, I'm going to shoot you. And that way people will start trading these coupons, right? So that is why you need taxes.
Right. She does. Thank you for clarifying again. Like she does like say that, and the fact that the state can be like the state is always prioritizing one class over the other.
So I did not say that. Karl Marx did. I'm a nobody. Don't listen to me. I did not say it. Karl Marx did.
So I kind of wanted to get to the question of like monetary sovereignty. First of all, does every country have monetary sovereignty, or is it like limited to a few nations around the world?
I think the best way to think about it is monetary sovereignty is like a spectrum. You know how there's like reds and then ultraviolets? So you have to kind of think of it as that way. Many nations have some kind of monetary sovereignty.
And aside from disingenuous like neoliberal smearings, which are like basically like the Paul Krugmans of the world, who basically like saying that modern monetary theory is like magic, but they don't have any substantial critiques of it. The one critique that I've seen, which kind of, I don't know where I've seen it, but which kind of stuck with me, is that it's limited to monetary sovereigns. So I wonder how it can be used in an internationalist and not just like an imperialist, how it can be ensured that it is used in an internationalist and not just imperialist.
You have to think of modern monetary theory as something that describes an economic phenomenon. So we are not describing something, we are trying to understand the world as it is. So let's talk about colonialism, because I wrote an article about how a country...
That was actually going to be my next question, which is like, I remember you had an interesting article about how colonialism squeezed out currencies and like, so yeah, please go ahead and explain.
So let's look at so I have two articles about it, but let's look at how what Britain did when they went to India. By the way, wait, do you speak Hindi?
I speak Tamil, that's it, and I speak a little bit of Hindi, yeah.
Okay, it's fine. Lutna, the word loot comes from
Lutna, right, yeah, looting, right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so the Queen granted these people who were like, I don't even know what they were, but let's call them fail sons, a charter for a company called East India Company. And they were a private company who were only liable to their shareholders, and their contract literally said you have to get exploration. It was basically a prospecting contract, as in like kind of like the way you dig for oil, but basically you go to a country and anything that's not anything that you can pull out, you can take and sell is essentially what the contract was. So they put all these mercenaries on a ship and they went to India. Let's fast forward 40 years after like many fights and wars and hell and heaven. They went to Bengal. So around it was right after the Mughal Empire collapsed in Delhi, and they got this like loser and did a coup. And they got Mir Jafar Ali to be named Sultan of, was it called Bengal? I can't even remember. And so the minute what they did is that they basically said that we'll let you stay in power, but you're going to have to give up your mint. This was in 1757. And you are also going to sign over exclusive contract, a contract for exclusive authority to coin money. And the East India Company also took over all the factories in Bengal, but then they blew up the factories, which I'll explain why, as well as the ports, the trade routes, and the highways for them to collect tolls. And then they fired all his tax collectors, and then like put in East India Company lackeys as tax collectors. And that's how they colonized India. So what you can see is, and this is a historical record, you can go to both Indian archives and British archives, and you'll see very similar things being written at the same time. And it's called the Treaty of Aligarh.
Right.
Yeah, so as you can see, the way they colonized a country is by robbing it of its monetary sovereignty. So then the king, I mean, what could he do when he didn't have a way to coin? Like, the thing was that they put the tax collectors were then like answerable to the East India Company and basically shoveling all the resources. And I mean, at the end, they shoveled about 9.2 trillion British pounds to India from India. So colonization is where you turn a country into a resource extraction factory. You enslave everyone. Like, think of factory farms, but now they're factory countries.
Right.
And so those countries, okay, so then Madras and they deindustrialized, they blew up factories that India used to have because Manchester, in Manchester, they had just invented the ginny. And what it could do is, like, if there was like a person with this, like a spindle, like with the spindle, you're like limited by your arm. Even if your arm is super strong, there's only so many strokes you can do per minute, right? To like a one person can probably spin enough yarn to support himself. And so it kind of kept the incomes mostly equal. There weren't too poor people, there weren't too rich people. Like like everyone's was kind of like, there were few rich, like it was kind of decent. And the population was unstable back then. But like a few years before they went to India, the factory was mechanized, so it could be, they could use steam power. And then what it was, but these machines, they can go so fast that they can do about 10 people's work at once. And when they do 10 people's work at once, these poor artisans who have to like spin their wheel, like they have to sell theirs 10 times the price. And these people are just going to come in, dump the goods, make them all go out of business. And when these artisans who spun the wool went out of business, at the
they got a job in the,
and that's where we get the proletariat class. And that is a class that has nothing to sell but its labor. And the more poetic way is nothing to sell but its soul, or whatever it is. England did not have, so the factory still kind of like the factory owners were making a lot more money as long as they kept the factory open and using a lot more cotton, right? But England couldn't, I mean, there's no way England could make the cotton. So they went east and then they went west, and they turned America into a cotton plantation. They basically turned India into a different kind of cotton plantation.
Right.
And so then both of them had to like keep on sending their cotton, raw cotton, into the Manchester factory, where they then, but then like the thing is that India did not have its own, well, basically they blew up all the shit, whatever. India couldn't have its own navy. So basically the only way like Indians could get clothes is to bring it back to India. But then because East India Company had a monopoly, they could hike up the price to whatever they want. And and so that's basically what they did. And what they noticed is that it was like a big, it's basically like a big suction cup that steals wealth from India to England, because then like when people have to like work, then people would have to work harder to get clothes. And then they take resources and like trade it with gold. And so it kind of just is an endless cycle that keeps getting worse and worse. But now we, instead of East India Company, we have like the companies like much bigger, and instead of one colony, it's like almost every country's a colony. So it's kind of like the process is the same, but it's like multiplied. You have a million factors. So if you understand the basic process, like the concepts remain the same, but you just have to remember there's more of it that's being done at a higher level, at a bigger volume.
Let's say you enact a socialist revolution in the US and implement MMT and a Green New Deal and all of that. That's still all within the domestic standpoint. From an internationalist standpoint, how can MMT in the US help address like crisis around the world? It cannot, you're saying.
Okay, no, because MMT is not prescriptive. It's descriptive of like, see, notice I spoke about what happened. It won't tell you what you should do, but it's going to help you understand what happened and what is going on right now. Marxism is where you need the revolutionary thought comes from.
Right.
Ultimately, we still, whatever you call it, MMT, whatever, it doesn't matter. We just need to understand the transactions as they happened and how it affects the individual and how the way the person makes money changes, and what money does for people, I guess, it is what we need to understand. If you don't want to call it MMT, don't, but just like you still need to have an accurate understanding through historical and statistical data.
There is this kind of, and as you described, some magazines, I also don't want to name anybody, but I definitely see a broader trend of like this kind of futurism, of like a kind of futuristic communism. I forget what the name was, but it's like kind of automated, like machines do the work for you or something like that.
Then if the rich own those machines, you are just somebody who can behead them. So they'll just want to exterminate you at that point. So like that's like that's not the trajectory. Like, because if humans, if they can get a maid that's a robot that won't revolt, there's no reason. And then like at that point, you're just a liability. There's nothing useful for you except turning you into fertilizer at that point.
Right. And I think that like there is a certain, I mean, and again, like this comes back to the question of like how the American left thinks of itself as the left. And I think if you think about this kind of vision of a utopia or like an idealism.
No utopia, no, but that's not utopia though. They don't understand that. What needs to happen is everyone needs to own the machines so that we can decide that there's plenty of food for all of us and we don't have to like kill one half of like. So if it goes, like if we let this cycle go for a little while longer, there's only one thing, and then that is the rich survive and all of us are going to be dead.
I just like wanted to ask one little thing about that, which is that like there seems to be this kind of, I don't know if it is naivete,
it's idiocy or dishonesty.
It is or dishonesty. There seems to be this tendency to think that like things would go the way it's happening in New York state, which is that like the assembly will be like filled with socialists, and then like socialists will basically enact policy according to their socialist visions. So what do you think about that, and like as far as that being the path forward?
These stupid Democrats were nothing compared to the SPD, the Social Party, Social Demokratisch, whatever, Deutschland. They had Rosa Luxemburg in it. They had August Bebel in it. So then what happened is that the Kaiser was like, okay, we can have a little bit of a constitution, join the parliament. And they're like, okay, we concede. And then a while longer happened, World War I happened. And instead of saying no war bonds, they're like, we'll concede. And they did World War I. But after World War I, even they were popular, but then they were not willing to do what was necessary, which is what Lenin did. And so they kind of slid and started to like their jumps got smaller and smaller. Like they went from having social insurance for everyone to oh, we have an inflation crisis and we're going to have like, I don't know, some like weird half-assed measure. And then what happened is that all these people who, there were these class of petty like bourgeoisie, like who were like middle managers in the Persian Empire while they enslaved like Slavic people. And so these middle managers were hereditary nobility, so they had a lot of title. And then after World War I, when capitalism squeezed them, they became poor. And that's where the economic anxiety comes from, is that it's called, the process is called proletarization. And when they got proletarized, they weren't thinking as a mass. They were just like, I want to go back to having my castle. And then, so when the industrialists came in 1920, and it's like, they were like, hey, there are all these union people. Can you go kill them? We'll give you like 7,000, was it Reichsmark back then? Like, we'll give you 10 times as, like 100 times as money. Now you'll have a little house and all this. They're like, sure. And that's where you get the SS from. So because the SDP didn't take care of these, like the proletarization process, what they were supposed to do is like take over the capital and then bring the poor up, not the middle class down. Well, there were a lot of doctors and precious university studied students who had nothing. And in 1929, they joined the Nationalsozialist Deutscher Arbeiterparty. And so then at the end, what happened is that these industrialists had a backroom deal, and they basically told Paul Hindenburg, okay, you better install Hitler, and there's no ands, ifs, and buts. So then they had to change the laws and the constitution, and then like they evoked patriotism. And so in the end, this is what, and the Social Democratic Party was like, people thought that Germany was the place with the first revolution and not Russia, because how leftist and advanced they were. And let me read this part. So let's see. Okay, so it says, when the Social Democratic deputies rose as a body to vote with the bourgeoisie parties, the chamber, including Hitler, broke into a storm of applause. The German nationalists burst into Deutschland, Deutschland über alles, and all the Social Democrats joined in. So even with the most leftist, a party that was 100 times more leftist than even whatever you guys can, whatever that bleep say, it is the way capitalism works will always make them clap for Hitler while singing Deutschland, Deutschland over alles. So there's only one thing that can, so far in history that we know of, that has been able to fight through the crisis capitalism, and that is the Lenin method. And so I'm not saying that's the only method, but that's the only one we haven't seen work, and there has never been a case of a revolution without the Lenin method.
So how is that, how's the Lenin method gonna take place here in the United States? I mean, like...
I don't know. I mean, it's not, like, I'm not Lenin. So what...
Of course.
What the idea right now is that because revolutions have never taken place in the United States, it's a new problem, like trying to...
That would be news to a lot of Americans, I think, right? Because the revolution is supposed to have been, the country is supposed to have been created by a revolutionary war.
No,
so,
that was a counter-revolution. Look at, read the Declaration
the Gerald Horne. The Gerald Horne book is also something that I'm reading.
No, read the Declaration of Independence. Clause 4 is like, I'm crying because the king is not going to let us import more slaves. And then 11 is something like, the king won't let us commit more genocide. We need land. And that is the reason why they did, it was like a slave owner revolt. And so, yeah, America's never had a revolution. It has had a counter-revolution, but we still have a constitution created by genocidal slaveholders. And one thing that the genocidal slaveholders have designed to make sure is, literally, James Madison said this in the Constitutional Convention, the purpose of our Constitution is to protect those who have property from those who don't. That was his words. So there's no structure, like they have planned, America's system works perfectly in the function that the original intent was, to protect those who have property from those who don't. So there is no way to work within the system. And so far, we have found out that they have not been wrong. It's been very good at that. But so the idea is that you have to learn how to read. So you cannot, it's like the Kobayashi Maru in Star Trek. The Kirk beats it because he kind of hacks the system and cheats. And that's basically the only way to do it. You can't like just follow the rules and not end up in like a ditch. And so so that is, but recognizing that is very, it's very, there's a lot of different issues. There's social stigma, there's career stigma, there's getting blacklisted and losing money. And so a lot of the people in the elites won't even like, because they, I don't even understand, but a lot of it is on purpose. Some of them are deceiving you, and a lot of them are just really stupid. And the custom, like the way capitalism works is it helps the most stupid and most obedient rise to the top, and it rewards them to the point where they're very comfortable in status quo. And so their risk assessment changes to the point where they'll always discourage a revolution because like they're okay till they die. So that's kind of the situation that's been always happening. Lenin describes this as the aristocracy of labor. And it is very, very dependent on imperialism. And basically they've done this, like they've moved all the factories over because they don't want you to like take over the factory and make your own guns. But they've given you a little bit more food, a little bit like so, but it is collapsing now. There is literally no class consciousness, no cultural memory, nothing here. And everything has to be built from the start.
Is that what excites you, or like is that what gets you going? Because like you feel like that's an opportunity, or
I feel dread and gloom, and I feel like, oh my God, life is gonna end. There's no hope.
I mean, you do it tirelessly almost. So I kind of like definitely come to you with a certain level of like curiosity about like what keeps you going.
I don't know what keeps me going.
And what the agenda is, what you hope to achieve, etc.
A lot of it is just me being able to just like help, like enlighten, like, or give a different perspective. And I don't know what I hope to do because this is all I can do. And I'm hoping that I have some good influence, and some people have said I have, so that's all I need. I don't know what keeps me going. I know what keeps me motivated. I'm just really curious about a lot of things, and I love learning, and I like doing trying new things. It's more on a basic, I enjoy the process, I guess. I don't look for the end results that much. Like a lot of times I just learn it for myself, and then like I distill it for everyone after I learned it for myself. So learning it for myself is what motivates me. When I started the podcast, I just was like, I'm gonna just tell the truth, and then you realize the truth is all screwed up and it's all tanky and it's like very confusing. Like everything you've not meant is a lie. But you also learn the way the system works. So there's a twofold thing. If I can influence you a lot, I can't influence many people. Like I will never be Maddow or Christopher Hayes or whatever. I'm blacklisted from all the everything that's not RT or the Telesaur. No one's gonna have me on. I'm going to get like I get a lot of vitriol, hate. Like I understand that. So that is the one way. The reach is going to be limited. And it is a problem that none of us know how to solve. So it's like a journey almost, because yes, if we want humanity to continue, we cannot go this path. To get this path, we need to have like enough ants to eat the like the large mammal. But these ants have like pesticide on sprayed, and their pheromones are all messed up, and so they're still going in circles, getting lost. Like that's how we are, and we don't know how to fix this, and it's a hard problem. So I'm banking on the faith that if enough of us understand the problem, somebody will eventually know how to fix it, I guess.